it wasn't crowdfunded in the beginning. You still ultimately did scam your audience. But anyway, I want to break down the whole situation around this studio as well as the day before. And also, there's a little bit more that's going on here besides just the closure of their studio that I'd like to talk about. I'll get into all that in just a moment. First, I want to talk about Opera GX real quick. Big thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Opera GX is the best browser available, period. I've talked about it many times, but it is the truth. Unlike other browsers, it's not a resource hog, so using Opera is never going to tank your performance or anything like that.
Don't get fucked by your RAM! Keep that shit under control!
Everything is super convenient with Opera because you can just have everything pretty much integrated directly into the browser, like your messaging apps, Discord, Facebook Messenger, Instagram. But there's also just so much you can do with it to customize it to your personal tastes. Thanks to GX mods, you can create something entirely unique and original, or you can choose from some mods that already exist on Opera, like the Eric Andre mod.
Customize sounds, wallpaper, colors. Do whatever the fuck you want.
Another fun feature is the GX Corner, which can keep you up to date on upcoming video game release dates as well as the best deals around, so that way you can find the optimal spot to shop for the upcoming game. It's just so many fun features that Opera has. I highly recommend using Opera as your browser from this point forward. You can click the link in the description below to get started. And thanks again to Opera for sponsoring.
Get Opera GX!
Now, I'm just going to break down the basics of this if you haven't followed this story. It's something I've talked about for about a year now. And the game just came out, so it's being talked about again. I also just made a video on it. But the day before was Steam's most wish-listed game. It was a series of trailers that were advertising a product that never actually existed, and the developers, their studio, is called Fantastic. Thus, they're responsible for the most misleading marketing I've ever seen. That would be like me trying to market myself on Tinder as being 6'5". Like, you can't really tell in a lot of the photos, but eventually, someone's going to find out that I'm not that tall. And that's exactly what happened with this game. Everything they were showcasing, this open-world zombie game, never actually existed. So what happened is, what did release 4 days ago is this fucking mess, this wonky piece of shit that is unplayably bad. And it's clear that they never, ever had that product they were showcasing for a year that people were so excited for. Now, I have a working game theory on what exactly led to all of this. I truly think Fantastic as a studio made all of these trailers to generate as much hype as possible to get like an audience hooked on their idea, their concept, to try and sell it to investors, to get a lot of investor backing behind it. So they go through this nefarious plot. They do get a ton of people excited for the day before, most wish-listed game on Steam and all that. But maybe no investors ever bid. Maybe they never received any investor backing. So then maybe they felt as though they were pressured at that point. They had their ass held to the fire. They have all these people demanding a game that they don't have and they don't have the ability to make. And perhaps they were fearful of a potential lawsuit for what they were doing. So then they cobbled together this piece of shit in their colon and poop it out onto Steam 4 days ago, and the rest is history. It's bad. Everyone hates it because it's really, really bad. And now they feel as though they can comfortably wash their hands of this whole chapter of the book and walk away without being in, like, legal trouble or anything like that. That's what I think happened, because I have no other explanation for why they would make a fake trailer, make fake trailers for a game that they weren't actively making and never were actively making. It doesn't compute. If this was a Kickstarter thing, then I'd get it. Their whole plan was to scam people by getting a ton of money in this game they weren't making. Like, that happens all the time on Kickstarter. But here, they weren't making money throughout this process of, like, misleading people. So what the fuck was the point? I can't quite figure it out. So this is the best theory I have for it. Now, anyway, that's kind of the whole breakdown in a nutshell. Now, I definitely want to mention that the game is no longer available for purchase anymore, apparently. So everyone who's got the game has a rare gem on their hands, because you can't buy it anymore. They closed the studio and they closed access to the game, which makes sense because how could they keep the game open if the studio's not there? Where the fuck would the money go? It just goes into like an endless void. But it seems as though the goal... For this group of goofballs protocols is now to erase the day before from the internet entirely. To wipe its presence, just poof, into the night, vanish. So people could move on and forget, and they could all go to their next big scam project, perhaps.
Oh my god, dude, this fucker just pulled up out of nowhere.
Trying to go. And also, it's worth mentioning, when the day before released, they themselves posted this bullet point list of very odd things. This is just a really fishy thing that went up, and it immediately sounded some alarm bell to me. On stream, I even said to one of the players, well, I didn't say it to him. There was a player in my day before lobby who was like, man, I can't wait for the updates to really smooth out this game. I said that that's never happened. I knew this game was never going to be updated. Like I mentioned, this feels as though they put it out because they felt they absolutely had to, and they had no other choice but to produce something tangible. And now that they did, they run away and can pretend it never happened. And this bullet point list is the main thing that made me feel that way. So it's like, to our future player who will dive into the game on December 7th, we made this for you. So like almost a little victory lap, you know, it's a celebration together. We'll continue improving the game and adding content. That didn't age well. It didn't even make it a fucking week before they put her down, took it behind the barn. They then have a bunch of mumbo-jumbo to the haters. To a person who didn't believe in us, we made this game for you too. We accept any kind of criticism and don't hold a grudge against you. Before we continue moving forward together, kindly allow us to note a few things. Please forgive us for not doing the best marketing and teasers. We learn something new and improve ourselves every single day. Jesus, you made teasers and marketing for something that never existed, and they also copied quite a bit of things from those. Well, please don't accuse us of scamming. That's not true. We didn't take a penny from anyone. Literally begging people to just stop calling them Scam Game, even though they are Scam Game Studio. Like this is still a scam. Please don't accuse us of asset flip. That's not true. Also, our team worked day and night for 5 years to make our dream game a reality. Which is also not true because the actual fucking city map is an asset. They used assets. Like I don't know why they're just blatantly lying about it. And then please don't underestimate our work. It wasn't easy. We are like you. We worked hard, and we're incredibly happy that our game will finally see the light of day for everyone to explore. Saw the light of day for 4 days. It didn't even make it long enough to learn how to crawl before you gave up on it. Well, it was always the plan to give up on it, clearly. I think that was designed from the beginning. They had a huge influx of cash. I think they had like a peak player count of like 30K. That's a lot of money. Like, that is actually a lot of money that they got up front for this fucking game, this pile of shit. So they did make a pretty penny off it and then bounce. They just said, we're out. The whole thing...
Emergencies can happen when you least expect it. Now there's a noose.
That's what I'm gonna ask her. Are you in a love here?
No, I'm married to Tim.
Ah, shiver me Timbo. Did he ever tell you the inner tube water polo story?
Yes, I have heard that a lot this weekend.
Hey, it says false children organize into the starry sphinx. And sure enough, those false children, or glowing orbs that we saw, are now in the shape of the sphinx itself. It then says again for video number 8, distracts observers as the mothership flees, to which we look over and see that the real sphinx is this giant ship, or on top of the giant ship, and is floating by. And then for video number 9 says the Great Pyramids rise, to which the Great Pyramids rise. Then for video number 10, it says the other pyramids awaken, to which we can see what looks like the Washington Monument, as several of it are all around, or at the very least several of these special trees are all around. We then get a diagram titled Present Situation, to which it shows us that there is one sphinx and countless pyramids all around it, with the final message that this was produced by the Anti-Device Association. So, again, a lot. Basically, according to the interview, whatever this supernatural or cosmic phenomenon is, it's been going on for a really long time. The Pharaoh himself was having workers slow down the trees and then contain them with these infinite pyramids. However, with whatever's happening now with these false children or orbs coming to Earth, the pyramids are beginning to rise. I know you're probably tired of hearing this at this point, but it'll make more sense with more context, so it's best if I just keep talking. I do also want to add, though, that in the description it says that
Oh my fucking god!
No extraterrestrial. Now, in the description of nearly every video, it says that whatever message we're getting is from Maze, so I don't know if that
Dude, we
is
better
how it's
fucking
telling
went up,
us
buddy.
it's not aliens, even though it looks like aliens, or if that's Maze trying to subvert us from the fact that it definitely is aliens. If it's not aliens, then possibly the Sphinx went to Mars some time ago as a means of just being in wait before it was reactivated by whatever these pyramids are doing. I don't know, but for reasons that I'll mention near the end, and of all the topics in this entire series, the whole pyramid orb Sphinx false children thing is probably the one that we have the least information on right now. But I will say that I feel the Sphinx are the good guys, or at least not as evil as I think the special trees are. I'll explain why in the analysis part, but for now, that whole diagram where we see that there's one Sphinx and a lot of pyramids, or in other words, things made to cover the trees, that's a bad thing. Because if the Sphinx is one way, at least according to my theory, that trees can be countered, one of them for like the countless number of pyramids everywhere, and pyramids include things like the DC Monument and the various actual pyramids and all of that. Only having one Sphinx to deal with all those, not good. Giza Guardian begins with a message saying that, weather permitting, on July 4th there will be a live broadcast of the Starry Sphinx in Giza. Also, this message is presented by the Maze News Network, so it looks like the Super Tech Corporation got into the media too. Glad that doesn't happen in real life. And sure enough, during the newsfeed, we see the aforementioned false children arranged in the shape of the Sphinx itself, walking through the desert. We watch as these green orbs dance around and then transform into these ladders before they all become these rows of rings and then lightning strikes. We then see a presentation from somebody called Dr. Disturbing called Project Giza Guardian. Dr. Disturbing is also the person who did the presentation on the Suez Canal crowd. I'll talk about who he may be at the end. In Project Giza Guardian, we are told of the story of Giza Glass. For thousands of years, the locals in Egypt knew that whenever a specific constellation arrives, lightning would strike the ground and create this rare material known as Giza Glass. That is until 1870, when a Briton Egyptologist known as Flinders Petrie discovered the constellation and how to get to the glass first. The glass itself was made in these long shards and fragments and was incredibly sharp. So sharp, in fact, that while Petrie was moving some of it, he fell and decapitated himself on the glass. However, the most miraculous fact is that his head was still alive. However, as it was alive, it began to swell and discolor before the story of Petrie ends. It says that whenever the glass got back to England, the group of it known as Petrie's Lot, it was deemed unusable because of the small fragments that it was broken into. However, the British began to give it out to American ambassadors. However, eventually, whenever Rockefeller was president, he decided to gather up all the glass together because he recognized special properties of it. Eventually, it was decided that the glass would be made into long blades and given to Greco-Egyptian swordsmen. These swordsmen were very tall, stone-like figures who were given Giza glass blades and set to guard the Grand Canyon. Anyone who was attacked by these swordsmen would be decapitated. However, there was a special vinegar concoction that could reduce the swelling side effects and allow the heads to return to their normal size and be placed back onto their body. If you're like me, this is really exciting because it connects a lot of dots, but we'll get there in a second. Victims of these swordsmen were given housing within the Grand Canyon itself, as well as a lifetime supply of this vinegar concoction, on the condition that they would lure enemies of state into the Grand Canyon to meet the same fate as themselves. The government claims that the Giza Guardian program was shut down in 1969 during the Dean presidency. However, sightings still occur to this day. We then completely change gears and switch to an interview of the wife of Thomas Crawford. If you'll remember, Thomas Crawford was the designer and sculptor of the Statue of Freedom. During the interview, his wife...
Dude, I don't have any more fucking ammo.
Absolutely hated America. And originally had the statue designed to show the form of a freed slave, but whenever America told him to get rid of that design aspect, he became furious. During his design, Thomas went to Egypt to get Giza glass to construct the sword of the statue. The reason I mentioned him being mad about America not letting him use the freed slave design is because Louisa goes on to say that perhaps he went and got the Giza glass just because he was an honorable man who wanted to finish the job, but I feel like there may have been some malice to it. As he was working on the sword, he cut off his...
Fuck, man, where's this nigga at? Oh, man, my girl's gonna kill me, man. I can't believe I lost her dog, man. What's everything okay? I can't find my dog, man. He ran out. His name's Nigga.
I don't know which one. Fuck it. Somebody said Gojo eye treatment. I went the wrong way. Oh, fuck me.
fingertip.
Looks like it's a minute
However,
now.
after cutting it off, he could still feel and control it. Eventually, he did the same thing with his hand, and whenever he came home to her, said that he could still feel his hand all the way back in the workshop. It was shortly after this that Thomas left for several days, and whenever Louisa came to look for him, she found him completely inside of the mouth of Freedom. She says that it wasn't that Freedom came alive and did it to him, it's that he willingly cut up pieces of himself and shoved it inside of the statue. Hence her statement earlier that Nina said, in which Louisa said it has his eyes. Louisa then confirms that the remains found next to Freedom within the cave were that of her daughter Nina. Louisa then ends by saying that Thomas and Nina are still alive and inside of the statue, protecting America to this day. So for one, that's why earlier I was so sure to say that the body in the cave was Nina's, because it's confirmed here. But also this asks questions of who's controlling it. If Thomas initially did the voluntary movements of putting his body parts inside of the statue, then is he the one controlling it? Or is the statue itself alive and closely related to the other Giza Guardians that have been spoken about in this episode already? We then shift gears again and get a report that says the Delaware River Journal has shut down because of the George Washington story, and that the new Delaware Journal has taken its place. Remember the part I mentioned early on in this video, how George Washington's alive? Well, that was enough of a no-no that the state shut them down for it. The new Delaware Journal tells the story of how the Anti-Dean Association stormed the Capitol and attacked the Statue of Freedom. The official claim from politicians is that the person who installed the statue did a faulty job at it, and that's the reason it fell and killed 150 people. Interestingly, the person who installed it was Philip Reed, the person who, if you'll remember from the Freedom Fowler story, is the one who peeled the skin off of the Statue of Freedom. Also, very bizarrely, it says that Philip Reed has recently become a demonized character by the Anti-Dean Association. So if I'm right, and the Anti-Dean Association is cool, then maybe they understand that Philip Reed skinning the statue was probably a bad move, or at least skinning the statue and then putting it on the Capitol building would be a bad move. But it's just an interesting detail that he is a figure they're looking down on historically. Sure enough, it says that Freedom is now being placed in the Grand Canyon, which when President Dean was asked why he did it, Dean said, "The rocks won't shoot her down," which, haha, funny joke, but also that means that Freedom is now where all of the other Giza Guardians are. And as we're going to see later, she definitely wasn't the first. So regardless if Freedom is Thomas controlling the statue, or if Freedom is one of these Giza Guardians who simply lure Thomas into her in the cleanest way possible, then it doesn't matter because now she's in the Grand Canyon doing the same things that the other Guardians are doing. We then see that a journalist for the New Delaware Journal leaked a government file and has since been exiled to Egypt. That journalist was Howard Melrose. If you'll remember Howard Melrose, he was the guy from Lincoln Looker who helped the bystanders break open the Lincoln statue, and then whatever that thing was came out of the top of it. And I didn't mention it because there was a lot going on and I didn't want to further confuse everyone, but he was the reporter who gave a report at the site of the Suez Canal incident, or more specifically, the part afterwards where all the bodies were jumbled together, and he was the one who said everyone was just one pile of flesh. That lines up with what we read here, that he was exiled to Egypt. So it seems that what happened to Howard is he was just an innocent bystander who witnessed the really weird event of the Lincoln Looker, or whatever was inside of Lincoln, coming out of the statue, so he decided to become a journalist and figure out what the government was up to. He leaked this file and has since been in hiding in Egypt, and while he was in Egypt, gave that report. In the leak, we see a description of how to handle Anti-Dean Association members. We see a map of the Grand Canyon with the Statue of Freedom moving through it, attacking people who are trespassing. Freedom goes by each person, cutting off their heads, which we understand to be the Guardian's MO, until they get to the last one, and sure enough, the name is Maya Arnoldson. We then cut to a tape called The Last Words of Maya Arnoldson, and in the audio, we can hear her walking before she's afraid of something, tries to run away before she's promptly killed, and her body falls down a ravine. It then says her body was found in the Grand Canyon in 2004, and her head was still missing. Okay, so this episode probably connected a lot of dots for you, or at the very least it did for me. So the government, or maze, or whatever body of people are hiding something in the Grand Canyon. They get these ancient warriors, known as Guardians, who are using this special material called Giza glass to be the Guardians for whatever secret they have. After it was discovered that Freedom was one of these Guardians, or at least close enough, she was also sent to the Grand Canyon. Maya, who we know has spent her entire life trying to out these evils, or at least out Maze for their evils, goes looking for whatever the secret is in the Grand Canyon, and she's killed by a Guardian. So, as we understand Giza glass to work, her head swells up to this giant size to which she has to take the vinegar stuff in order to get it to shrink. It's not understood how much of her brain capacity transfers from human to meatball crown thing, but probably not the best. So she's essentially one of these mindless crowns who the only purpose she has is to lure other dissenters into the Grand Canyon. And this explains why in Canyon Crown, Lauren's dad took her to find... sister, Maya, in the Grand Canyon. And why whenever Lauren saw the big meatball thing, she says, I think that was Maya. And we get further confirmation of that in the next video. Fallen Father opens with the return of the most important character in the entire series. That's right, Mr. Squirrel. The video is back in the traditional Maze Movie Maker style, and then from the text that we see on screen, we can deduce that this is Lauren, the daughter of Nathaniel. However, in the text, we see that Lauren's father has passed away, with the description that he left saying he's going home and then never came back. However, she mentions that something followed her home and then runs inside before, as she's hiding, this giant shadow appears over the window. This is all while text is being displayed on the screen, saying that she won't forget her father and that it's been 3 days. Finally, it ends with the message Nathaniel Arnoldson, July of 1961 to May of 2021. So Nathaniel has passed away for some reason, and now Lauren is making this video. However, as she mentioned, something from the Grand Canyon followed her home, and sure enough, there is a giant shadow that appears over the window from above, implying that it's floating down. This is more than likely Aunt Maya following her home from the Grand Canyon. To me, this implies that she at least kept some of her brain function, or enough to recognize that that was her niece. And while her communication skills may not be present, it seems that she's trying to reach out to Lauren. And continuing the trend of tying up loose ends and making more things make sense, we have Rockefeller Revelation. Rockefeller Revelation opens up with the same movie maker style as before, saying that their dad has been dead for 3 months and now they're going to continue his work, before it says Dr. Disturbing presents. This is now the third video in season 2 made by Dr. Disturbing, and the fact the only passed away father that we know of is Nathaniel, and the fact that it opens in the movie maker font we're used to, I'm going to safely make the assumption that Dr. Disturbing is one of Nathaniel's kids. Now, since it sounds like a guy's voice doing the narration for the Dr. Disturbing parts, I'm going to say, and this also looks better on a timeline and graph, that Lauren's brother is Dr. Disturbing. Now, Dr. Disturbing could also be an alias for the two of them together, and her brother just does the narration parts. In fact, that's more than likely what it is, considering the movie maker style we see Lauren using is the one that transfers into the Dr. Disturbing style. However, he doesn't have a name, and he's at least doing the narration, so I'm just going to call him Lauren and Dr. D. And from Dr. D, we see something called the Rockefeller Tapes, Part 7. In the story, we hear an interview from John D. Rockefeller and the time that he visited Germany, and they named their airships after him. Now, I've got an entire chart up there that you can probably see the corner of right now that I'm going to use to explain the whole timeline of everything. But for now, I will mention that from my maths that I put together, that John D. Rockefeller was president beginning in 1909, which would have been before World War I. So it seems this description that he's giving is pre-World War I, or in other words, the ships that you're going to figure out he built right here in a second were used during the Great War. We're then given a diagram of these airships where everything looks fine at first, until we see the interior, and that pretty much the entire inside is a giant face with whatever this growth is behind it. Rockefeller explains that due to his setup of having guardians turn people into crowns within the Grand Canyon, that there was an overabundance of crowns. At the same time, America was risking going into a Great Depression, so he decided that the best thing to do was sell the crowns as slaves to Germany. Or essentially, crowns can't fight back and don't have the capacity to know what they're doing, so you can just give them to the Germans to use for their war machine. We then see a design for an anti-airship death ray, and after looking over the schematics for it, all seems well, until we see the inside of it, and there's whatever this vane tooth thing is that seems to be the power of it. Not only that, but at another part of the diagram, there is a lamp mentioned, implying that these are in some form beings of light or energy. Further, in Rockefeller's interview, he explains that the American economy was dying and Germany wanted to use these crowns as weapons. So Rockefeller sold over 100 of these crowns to Germany, who then put them in their airships and named the airships Rockefellers in his honor. Germany did help the American economy. However, as Rockefeller says, by 1918, thousands of people had been killed by Rockefeller ship bombings, and Rockefeller's presidency ended before he could respond to the German attack. So Rockefeller, who we established a couple episodes ago, gathered all of the Giza glass in order to make these swords that the Guardians then used to make crowns, took those crowns and began selling them as weapons to people who eventually became enemies of the United States. It's never expressly said what the crowns do. I mean, initially I thought, giant meatball heads running through the battlefield are probably a pretty effective psychological weapon, if nothing else. However, these things are inside of blimps, and he says used to bomb people. So maybe they can release some kind of energy bomb or something similar. The first thing that comes to mind is the orbs that were seen at the beginning of Giza Guardian, not Giza Guardian, and Starry's Phoenix that come out of the plane and sort of blow up. Maybe the crowns can do that. I don't know, but they were effective as a weapon for some reason. We then see a diagram of something called Operation Pyramid Plasma, which shows several men bringing one of the aforementioned anti-airship death rays to the top of the pyramid. It then shoots down the airship, showing that whatever this death ray is, it seems to work against the crowns inside of the airship. In the final part of Rockefeller's interview, he says that the American public has now figured out that he had a hand in the Germans bombing an airship program and essentially want him dead. We then cut back to the operation, where it shows us that after this death ray was fired, the energy disintegrated the men standing near the death ray. Eventually, after wandering through the desert, all of them reform as one entity before traveling back to their homeland, aka the United States, and getting retaliation or vengeance on the person that caused this. We then see that on May 23rd of 1937, Rockefeller entered a bunker underneath the plaza and was never seen again. However, there is a note that the door was melted by a massive heat ray. And then to make it even more interesting, it says that there has only ever been 2 images of this suspect, to which the 2 images we see are the first Christmas before Rockefeller found the special tree, and the very first picture ever taken of the special tree in 1840. Okay, so that happened. So we got all the stuff about Rockefeller, was selling crowns to the Germans, funded the German war machine, etc. But the cool part, at least the coolest part to me, is all these soldiers who were standing near the death ray got atomized and then reformed as one creature that somehow managed to travel all the way across the ocean and then immediately get revenge on Rockefeller. That whole never seen again thing is because that guy got blasted into, neutrons. That mention of the bunker door was melted open is because this amalgamation of 20 fried atom people all showed up once like Dr. Manhattan and just took his door off his hinges and made him non-existent. I am referring to this creature as the Avogadro. And yes, I'm referring to it as that because of the Electric Man from Black Ops 2 Zombies. It's my channel, I can do what I want. So this Avogadro gets revenge on the person who created the crowns within the Zeppelins, and also most likely the death ray itself. Also, the 2 pictures that it appears in are also very interesting, because the one of the plaza is 1933 or 1934, and the one of the special tree is 1840. So this creature is not only able to travel across the oceans or possibly teleport, it's also a time traveler. And he's very upset at the people who killed him, rightfully so. And I'm going to continue referring to him as the Avogadro. So there's an electric man that has the power to melt bunker doors and turn people to ash running around. I also want to remind you, this is the same series where a living statue that skins people and George Washington are also running around, and James Dean's the president. This is the best. I love this. We have now reached what is, to date, the final episode of the series, although there will be more, Washington Wonderland. I also want to go ahead and preface that this one ties up a lot of loose ends and starts a whole lot of other ones, so par for the course. The video opens with a message that after an unsuccessful lobotomy, Virginia Arnoldson better recounts the story of the Rockefeller Tree tragedy. So there's Virginia again, a little girl who hasn't been mentioned since the Rockefeller Tree tragedy and how she went to Wonderland. And something that may have not meant a lot then, but definitely does now, is that last name, Virginia Arnoldson. Somehow, Virginia is related to Maya and Nathaniel, and this series goes from just being the telling of a few people in this weird world to one connective story of a family. Virginia says that after the events of Rockefeller Tree tragedy, she was left at an orphanage along with several others who all of their parents believed them to be doppelgangers. However, when they got older, the military took all the boys and the doctors took all of the girls, leaving Virginia by herself. She then begins to describe in better detail what happened to her.
I don't know why I came in here. I'm dead.
Initially, she was laying there on the ground, and she looked around and saw the aforementioned forest of special trees. However, when she looked up, she realized that the tree mirrored itself, or in other words, at the top of the tree, there was another tree directly above it that was facing the opposite direction, so the tops of both trees were touching. Then above that one was another tree flipped the right direction, so that the two stumps of it were touching. This continued on and on forever. The best way to describe this is whenever you place two mirrors across from each other and see an infinite reflection with each other reflection looking the same way. She looked beneath her and saw the exact same scenario. As a matter of fact, the ground she was on wasn't even ground, but a thin layer of powder that smelled like baby powder. All around her were flashes of light. And out of these flashes of light, men came running from every direction. One of these men came out of a flash of light and told her that the trees are trees. Before saying the line, "You could be her. Anyone could be her. I won't leave you." Suddenly another flash comes and the two of them appear in a field. Then another flash and they're somewhere else. Every few seconds, another flash takes place that they can't control, and every time that they flash to somewhere, they're doing something else. Virginia describes that this went on for years and years. Initially, she was sad, then she became angry, and eventually just tired, like the man with her. She decided to name this man Everett, and Everett never left her side. It's never even said if the two of them ever had a real conversation or were just stuck in this infinite loop of flashing from place to place, but it seems Virginia just cherished having someone there. Also, during these flashes, they would switch from one of the layers to another. In other words, one flash, they could be standing at the layer Virginia began at, and then be one stage above them, then another stage above, and then back down again. Also, there were several people, referred to as climbers, who were stretched out and scorched along the side of trees. Virginia believes that if someone had tried to climb up a tree whenever they were flashed, this is what would happen to them. This went on for years until one day, all of the trees bent over at once and there was a great flash and she woke up back in New York in the plaza with her friends. This is the scene that Virginia woke up to in the original Rockefeller Tree tragedy. She says that when she turned 18, she left the orphanage and her dad was dead and her mom was so paranoid because of the events that happened. Eventually, Virginia, fed up with her life and deciding that she's an imposter in this world, decides to go back to the plaza to find some answers. When she gets there, she sees the special tree standing at the top of a building at the plaza. This, mind you, is very similar to John Rockefeller Jr.'s account, saying that he still sees the tree in the plaza and it looks like a man. Virginia speaks to the tree, and the tree tells her to come back in 3 years and she'll have to exchange one life for her own. This message of coming back in 3 years loops 3 times over. I'm not going to go into the details of it right now, but for now, let's just assume that it's been 9 years since Virginia initially approached the tree. She says during these 9 years, she met a secret agent who was a very evil man who eventually approached.
Dude, there's a fucking other guy over there. Look, to your left, you dumbass.
Approached her and said that he was assigned to protect her. She says that the man's name was Leonard. She had never loved anyone before and no one would ever have her, so she felt welcome in his presence, and the two of them had a son together. The son was never born, but she decided to name him Everett after the man she met in Wonderland. After the end of this 9 years, and with her very pregnant with her son, Virginia goes back to the tree, who gives her directions. After walking for 4 days, she hears the music and comes across the Washington Monument. After stepping into the monument, she sees that there are bodies everywhere. However, the music is so calming that she doesn't seem to mind. She gets into the elevator that was mentioned in the Washington Standard operation, and once she's risen to the top, the music paralyzes her, again something that can be seen in the operation, before the ground drops out from the elevator and she falls and hits the floor. When she hits the floor, her body stops, but she feels her soul keep going. She says she floats for what feels like 500 years before she appears back in her body. However, this body is slightly different than the one that she was in. Not only that, but she was no longer pregnant. Virginia believes that whenever the tree told her she'd have to exchange one life for her own, Virginia was ready to give up her own life, but did not realize that she had exchanged Everett's life for her own. However, just like the body that she had passed out of, this body too had just fallen from the top of the DC monument and was completely crushed, meaning she was unable to move. However, Virginia came to realize that herself, as well as everyone else within the monument, was all still alive, even though logistically they should be dead from the fall they endured. The music kept everyone paralyzed and alive, and in excruciating pain as they bled out onto the ground over the course of several years. It seems, according to her, that the tree within the monument was keeping them alive for some reason. This was until one day there was a great flash and everyone woke up outside. Whenever they woke up outside, they were in a field of those trees. Helicopters appeared and picked everyone up. The helicopter told Virginia that the year was 2003, and everything she knew had been wrong. After Virginia tells those that she came to know in her false life sorry, she then asks that whoever's reading this may remember her, before the text says that she was given a second lobotomy and never spoke again. However, she drew this artwork depicting how she wanted her life to be. It finally ends with the message that Virginia Arnoldson passed away in 1980 at the age of 59. And we are then given the message her son Everett is the 20th Washington absentee. And that is the end, at the moment, of the monument mythos. So, to try to digest everything I just read, it seems that whenever Virginia passed into Wonderland at the tree tragedy, it wasn't a quick, oh, I was in Wonderland and I was back in the plaza thing that it originally seemed to be. Yet to her it was the course of several hundred years. And we'll get into all the theories and what it could mean and how this happened later, but she met a man named Everett who took care of her in the best way someone can, just being a companion, before she came back to the plaza, and then, after many years of her life, met with the tree that sent her to the Washington Monument. Now, we know the Washington Monument feeds on people that come through it. We saw this with the Civil War prisoners. We saw this with the Anti-Dean Association members who were sent to the camps that were located around monuments. We saw this with the Civil War prisoners. We saw this with the Anti-Dean Association members who were sent to the temporary prisons. And then after doing the process that several others had, she left one body and wound up in another. Now, as you probably picked up from the dates mentioned at the end, it seems like there are two Virginias. Because remember, it says one died in 1980 at the age of 59, and the other one was alive and picked up by helicopters in 2003. As a matter of fact, that's not the only instance of something like that happening. Remember how Maya Arnoldson in One World showed up in a report from 1977 that got leaked that says she was killed by Freedom? However, in the other timeline, she was making movies with her brother exposing Maze after the Maze movie maker was built in the year 2000. Also, that final line, her son Everett was the 20th Washington absentee. However, it says only 19 people were recovered. And just to make everything even more confusing and far out there, this is in the description of Washington Wonderland. Everett Arnoldson, commonly referred to as the 20th Washington absentee, is a humanoid creature that is purported to inhabit the forest of the Washington Zone. Have you ever seen Everett? What? So Virginia was pregnant with Everett whenever she took the plunge and then was transported from one body to the other. This explains why in the Washington Whirlpool video, It says all 19 of the absentees were recovered, specifically leaving out Everett because he was never recovered, even though he was identified in the description of that video. Washington absentee. Also, that's what I meant then by it's such a mind blow, because after I finished the series, I went back and watched Washington Wormhole, and seeing in the description and in the video that was accounted for over a year ago blew my mind. It was fantastic. But even though Everett was never recovered, despite being identified as the 20th absentee, here in the description we see that he's a humanoid creature that roams about in the forest. And I do have a theory on why that may be. Is it a dog?
This year I want to get her a gift she'll actually use.
How about big brand yoga gear for great prices at Sierra?
How about something bigger?
Top brand winter gear at extraordinary prices at Sierra.
Maybe something more personal.
How about a massage gun you could use together?
I'm his sister.
It's my sister.
How about a tandem bike?
My girlfriend.
Did you think they were? Yeah, I did. Let's get moving.
Good theory, probably not. But now with that, we have finally, I have no idea what this is going to cut down into the video. I've been talking about this for 3 hours now. This is going to be a long one, but there's still 4 sections left. It's things to pull out I didn't catch till a second watch. There is the important characters. There is a linear timeline, and then there's theories about it. And also the way that I want the rest of this to be structured. If you're interested in watching the whole thing, you should probably watch this next part next. But I've got timestamps in the description for each piece. So if you hear me talk about stuff I caught on a second watch and want to go straight to theories, you can do that if you like. Or you can just watch it straightforward, however you want. But now that I have finally gotten through the description of the series itself, and there was a lot, I can get into things I noticed on a second watch. For one, the first video in the series, Liberty Lurker, which feels like forever ago at this point, says that the classified blueprints from 1949 were not released until 36 years later. 1949 plus 36 equals 1985, the year that the Liberty Lurker was first seen. So more than likely, the only reason that those blueprints ever saw the light of day was because people had questions over what the Liberty Lurker was. You know, the giant thing started to pop out of the statue, pedestal, flesh pit, whatever. Also, looking at the knowledge we have now, more of it makes sense. So there's a line that Virginia says in Washington Wonderland. Whenever she's laying there on the ground, wondering why the tree's keeping her alive, she says, "Does it just want our blood?" And if you'll remember, in the schematics for the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, there is a drain and a waste storage. And combining that with stuff like Maya says in the Movie Maker video, where she says that some places haven't been fed in years, and the fact that the immigrants on Ellis Island said the smell of the slaughterhouse was very strong, I think that these sites quite literally eat blood, and people are kept in this half-trance alive state to serve as blood banks. It's Virginia and the other Washington absentees just being there for years, constantly bleeding out into the floor. And it seems like if these locations are not fed, they get upset and start to electric explode like what happened to Maze in 1980. Also, and I may be jumping the gun a little bit into the theory portion, remember at the end of Liberty Lurker how you can supposedly see like the actual Liberty Lurker thing coming out of the statue? Well, in my opinion, the top of whatever's coming out of the statue looks very similar to the climbers that are shown in Washington Wonderland, or at least the trees with the climbers on it. This is, again, approaching theory territory, but I think some of the things that happen in Wonderland can be seen in our world, and perhaps if someone was a climber and becomes this burnt amalgamation on a tree, they can become
fucking
these
loser.
giant monstrous forms
Give me
in
the
the real
shit, pussy.
world. Or at the very least,
Woo!
if someone is a climber on a tree in Wonderland, that tree may act up in the real world and do stuff like come out of the Statue of Liberty. Because keep in mind, whoever designed the blueprint for the Statue of Liberty had a mechanism in there with the engine and axle and wheels for an eventual departure. So whoever
Fucking
designed
took off with Buddy's car.
possibly wanted would whatever what was in there eventually come out. Now, I also want to clarify, the series is not done, and season 2 isn't even done. So whenever I bring up theory stuff, there's a solid chance that information will come out that completely shuts up anything I say about it. I'm kind of working with like half a jigsaw puzzle here. And that's not the discredit to Alex at all. He hasn't laid the whole puzzle out yet. That's the discredit to me wanting to do the video now rather than be patient and waiting because I'm an idiot. Lincoln Looker's still a tricky one to me, even on a second watch through, because the people in there weren't in any abject suffering, at least according to Maya. And also to clarify, the Maya that was in Lincoln is not our Maya. Remember how the whole mention of the Lincoln Looker is the president just decides who's going to be the Lincoln Looker, and that's just how it is? Well, this Maya was put in there for 2 weeks, and then they realized they got the wrong person. So more than likely, because this Maya had the same name of our Maya, they assumed it was her, threw her in there, and then realized that no, it's not her, and then they take her out. But for whatever reason, our Maya Arnoldson, who we know to be not the best friends of the United States government, they wanted her to be a Lincoln Looker. And because we know that there's someone in there, I'm going to imagine the thing that comes out at the end of it is probably a person's hand. And the closest thing that I can attribute this to is the Freedom Statue. Because the Freedom Statue is supposedly killing people and absorbing their souls or their essence or whatever. And then there's the line of graffiti that says the souls of Lincoln will be freed, I believe on Mount Rushmore. So maybe the Lincoln statue drains souls over time. Maybe it's somehow collecting essence like the Freedom Statue. Again, I don't know yet. It hasn't been elaborated on, so I'm just taking a shot in the dark. In Rushmore's Revenge, the graffiti about the blood of liberty will be avenged is a lot more literal. It makes a lot more sense with the analysis I said earlier. Also, that one line is specifically more weird the more I think about it, the whole I will introduce infection. Because we see that whatever introduces the infection makes those giant spikes all over the Rushmore head, which I'll go ahead and say now looks like special trees, and I'm pretty sure that's just a bunch of special trees. So the infection is merging elements of Wonderland into our world or the real world, something that we see later can happen. Because in Starry Sphinx, whenever it says that pyramids everywhere are rising up, that's a bunch of special trees happening everywhere. So the infection was just that at Rushmore. Also, and I may just be dumb and like overthinking this element and there's nothing there, but the light that is flashing at the top of Mount Rushmore is very similar to the light that is flashing on top of the Rockefeller Plaza at the end of Rockefeller Tree Tragedy. That was a mouthful. So perhaps as John Rockefeller Jr. said, that the tree is alive and at the top of the plaza, that's another one of these tree people or man trees or whatever at the top of Rushmore. Also, remember how they said that the National Park Service's response to this was to pour baby powder everywhere? And Virginia also said that the thing that was separating the barriers between the different layers within Wonderland was baby powder. My theory here, and again, this is edging into the theory stuff, but is that thing that everyone is calling baby powder is actually a sort of dimensional barrier. In other words, within Wonderland, the baby powder is what separates the sort of barriers between one mirrored universe to another mirrored universe. So whenever this infection comes, which turns out to be a bunch of special trees and Wonderland crashing into the real world, the only thing the government can do is throw a barrier everywhere as a means to try to keep it out. Or essentially, baby powder is an interdimensional picket fence. The only thing I really got of the Alcatraz video on second watch was the fact that radiation, again, made the island go kooky all at once, which with things like the Suez Canal crab, we saw is a common through line. So Air Force One Angel's really interesting. Remember how I said the infection that came everywhere was like the dimensional crossover or the special trees showing up on Rushmore and all of that, and then that happened the same day the Air Force One Angel went over. Yeah, so that's the angel. I keep umming a lot. I've been recording a while. So I'm going to say that this infection is the angel somehow breaking the barrier between worlds and allowing Wonderland to flow into the real world. I've also got a theory for what the angel is, but I want to save it for the theory section because it's one of the only ones I have that I'll actually put my foot down on. The others are just You'll see. In the Washington wormhole, the mention of the door being very large, and that's something even Virginia pointed out in Washington Wonderland, that it seems like the door was made for something much bigger, may be similar to how the Statue of Liberty was built for the tree or whatever that was in there to eventually come out. So maybe the DC monument was also designed for something to come out of it if it needs to or if it's ready. Also, that ending of Washington wormhole where the monument bends over and lightning strikes, that would be the moment that Washington and the other absentees wake up all together, or they were unconscious, I should say, appear all together outside of the monument. All right, so Delaware doubles really interesting on a second watch through because it makes a lot more sense than just Washington freezing in a river for 200 years. Remember how Virginia went in 1948 inside of the DC monument, then fell through the floor, and then whenever she comes out, she's in 2003? Well, it seems that Wonderland, or more specifically the special trees, can get real funny with time. Another example of that being the Avogadro Man, how he showed up from 1840 to 1934. So my theory is that the reason we got that whole George Washington bit isn't just because it's hilarious, but also because Washington touched the tree or had an interaction with Wonderland and wound up in the present time. So that is an example that someone can seemingly unwillingly be teleported to a different time. So rewatching the Rockefeller tree tragedy began to shape a lot of the theories I'm going to talk about at the end for how the world works. But I'll go ahead and say this, and it's something you've probably put together at this point, that it seems there are two different timelines taking place in this world. To look at it within Wonderland, you have a tree, and then you have a mirror.
Who's the tastiest snack in the whole pantry? You? Crazy good.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be breaking down the rest of the unfiction historical horror nightmare, the Monument Mythos. Now, I've already made one video about the series, but if you haven't seen that video or haven't heard of the Monument Mythos, then a very short description that does not do the series justice is that the Monument Mythos is a historical fiction horror series that encapsulates American monuments and monsters that lie underneath them. It plays with elements like fictitious presidencies and conspiracies within the U.S. government, as well as mythology, mass homicide, and Lovecraftian monsters. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then stick around as we talk about the narrative that ties all of it together. The series has a ton of recurring characters and alternate timelines, and a lot of names and data to put together, and hopefully I can do that for you today. Now, if you've never heard of the Mythos before and haven't seen my first video on it, preferably for one, I ask that you go to the description and check out the original series over on the Mr. Manticore channel. It's a fantastic watch and well worth your time. But if you just want to get on board here and check out the series later, then after the ad, I'm going to give a brief rundown of everything I covered in the first video. Because, it's understandable if you don't want to take 3 hours of your time just to get context for this upload. I say that kind of as a joke, as it seems 3 hours means nothing to you people, considering that my first video on this topic has over 12 million views, making it the highest viewed video on my entire channel. And to that, I want to ask, is everything okay at home? But for real, I really appreciate the support that you guys showed me on the first video. I made that video over a year ago now, and it was when my channel was much smaller than it is now. So to see that many of you go back and support what I did then, it means the most. Thank you. And again, if you haven't heard of the Mythos and wonder why 12 million people consider it worth 3 hours of their time, then stick around. Also, how do you guys like the new corner? I'm probably going to get bored of this camera placement and change up the wall a couple dozen times. But this is what we're working with. It's got the cute little window to set the plushies up on and stuff. And then we've got real Wendigoon back there and my record, shout out Post Malone, and all my whiteboards, which I'm sure you'll see more of in the future. I like it. I dig the vibe. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into a recap and breakdown of the Monument Mythos. But before we actually do that, and I corrupt your mind with ideas of giant monsters and abominations that eat people, let's talk about something that might actually help you instead. And that product that will make your life better is AG1. Despite what this Saudi penmanship may imply, I come to you today as a firm believer in the good news of AG1. And for a limited time, today's offer is a year supply of vitamin D3 and free days of AG1 in their convenient travel packs. More on that at the end. For those that don't know, AG1 is a dietary supplement that can assist in everything from your digestion to your immune system to your daily energy. And it does that not by being several different supplements and pills that you have to take every morning, and is instead just one drink. So now you can get your daily intake of things like citrates, B12, biotin, probiotics, and zinc in one easy step. Now, those that have seen my previous AG1 ads will know that when I did the first ad for them, I hadn't yet seen the full effects of what the product can do. But after taking AG1 for several months now, I am a firm believer in whatever they're selling. I found that my daily energy has been better. I have found that I am more productive and I can focus better to get tasks done. No, I'm not saying that AG1 is going to do the impossible. You're not going to drink this and immediately get fit and improve your lifestyle. But what I am saying is that AG1 is likely to give you the energy to do those things. Because as you watching a YouTube video essay right now, I'm going to take a bet and say that your diet isn't what it's supposed to be. Let AG1 do the hard part and worry about your body the way you should. Your AG1 will come in a bag like this, or you can do what I did and put it in this very aesthetic thermos to help with storage and refrigeration. So all that you have to do for AG1 is get 8 to 12 ounces of cold water, and from there just take a scoop of your AG1, dump it into the water, shake it up, and that's all it takes to start your day off right. Not only that, but as I've mentioned before, AG1 tastes just fine. It's just kind of a naturally sweet-smelling flavor and is an excellent way to start your day. Now is the perfect time to start taking care of your body the right way. And if you do it right now, then you'll receive 2 free gifts. That is right, 2 free gifts. Because if you go to the link in the description now, for one, you will receive 5 days worth of AG1 in travel packs, but today for a limited time only because AG1 and myself want you to have the best deal possible. If you head to that link in the description, you will get 10 free travel packs instead of 5. That's right, double your value for the same price. Today's a deal you definitely don't want to miss out on. And the other is a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, which all you have to do for that is put a drop of it in your AG1 every morning to start your day on an even better note. If you're missing out on AG1, then you're really missing out. And there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Again, that's go to the link in the description to receive your 2 free gifts and start on AG1 today. Thank you all so much for watching the ad. Thank you so much to AG1 for sponsoring the video. It really does mean the most. You all check them out. Link is in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. So in my first video, I covered Season 1 and Season 2 up until the episode Washington Wonderland. Since then, Season 2 has concluded, Season 3 has began and concluded, and an entire spin-off series known as the Nixonverse has began and concluded as well, which we will talk about the Nixonverse when we get to it. So depending on what you consider the Nixonverse, in my first video, I covered either just under half or just over half of the entire series. So for those who may be new or just because it's been a while, let's do a summary of everything I talked about in that first video. And even if you've seen the first video or watched it right before watching this one, I still urge you to stick around for the summary. Because there's some things that need emphasized now that I didn't know to emphasize then. As I mentioned in the intro, most of the monument mythos concerns monsters. Respect my authority! The first of these is a video called Liberty Lurker, which shows that underneath the Statue of Liberty, the United States government has been feeding people to some kind of behemoth. We then see that on Mount Rushmore, these giant spikes appear out of the faces of the presidents. We'll later find out that these spikes are something known as special trees. These trees occur right after graffiti shows up, urging citizens that the United States government is killing people within national monuments. After that, we see that the island of Alcatraz is actually...
That's what's up.
What can I get you, ladies?
Can I have a turkey plate with cheese and beef, please?
Of course you can, yes.
My
kids found...
You're in the podcast business, and you have a guest, and Peloton calls you. This guy, Robert Kennedy Jr., is a Democrat. I don't know Robert Kennedy Jr. I've seen his videos. What about Robert Kennedy Jr. would make your pompous, arrogant, an ass pick up a phone,
Like writing
and tell somebody else, you better not, like this guy's fucking Hitler, some horrible fucking human being that walks the face of the earth. He's a fucking Kennedy. He's a smart guy. He has his own beliefs and his values. His podcast has to come down. You sell stationary bikes for a fucking living. You are a fucking clown. There is something mentally fucking unstable about you, that you have the balls to pick up the phone and call somebody and tell them to take another fucking guy's podcast down. Really wrap your head around that. Do you know what a fucking absolute pompous, arrogant... I don't even have the rest of the words for this.
Like, let this man cook.
Yeah, he's just gotta sit there like...
I don't think it is a surprise to anybody watching this channel that brands shy away from working with people who are politically incorrect, or we could call them, dissenting voices. I mean, it's the entire reason that we started Jeremy's Razors, because Harry's was advertising with us. They pulled out over values misalignment. This particular instance that we're talking about today might be the funniest yet, and it involves Theo Von, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Peloton. So recently, while UFC President Dana White was on Theo Von's podcast, they were chatting about sponsorships and advertisers, and Theo told an anecdote about one of his sponsors, Peloton, and how they pulled their sponsorship from his show after he had R. F. Kennedy Jr. on the show, and then refused to take down the episode because they were concerned by it. And first, I was taken aback because it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, he's a Democrat. He's not a traditional Democrat, but he is still a Democrat. And we're used to seeing this done to conservatives. But of course, we know it's not really about party affiliation. It is about political correctness and people's feelings. In this case, Peloton's feelings. Just watch this clip from the podcast, and Dana's response to all of this is just the best.
Peloton was we just got an update. Peloton was the people who wanted an ad out. Peloton. And meanwhile, you have RFK. So Peloton, yeah. What do they sell? Fucking bikes? The stationary bikes? Yeah, dude. Peloton sells stationary bikes, and they got a problem with Kennedy. You Peloton. Who the fuck are they? Yeah, first, right? Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. Peloton bitching about Robert Kennedy.
This is completely the energy that we need to be bringing. Somebody commented and said, literally was buying a Peloton tonight, been on the fence, not now. I have one, but I barely use it, so now I'm going to say that I'm actually boycotting Peloton, and not that I'm lazy, and that I just don't want to walk upstairs to ride it. Somebody else said, Peloton's marketing team is kicking rocks right now, haha. Yes, to be honest, they probably are, because after this, they went on and they ranted about the Peloton CEO and about Peloton for like another 10 minutes. I would highly suggest watching because it's very, very funny. But obviously, like you saw in the video, this made Dana White very angry, and rightfully so, because this kind of treatment is not new to him. Because he goes through this constantly with UFC and their sponsors, because he personally is so unapologetic about his values, and that impacts who wants to work with UFC. And he has a great quote about this whole sort of thing from when he posted a video of Trump on his social media, and he got a ton of backlash, but he said, quote, I posted a video for Trump on my personal social media, and one of our big sponsors called us and told us to take that down. You know what I said? Go F yourself. You vote for whoever you want to vote for, and I'll vote for whoever I want to vote for. That's how this all works. I don't even care who you vote for. That's not of my effing business. But F you, don't ever call me and tell me who to vote for. Again, this is the exact energy that we should be bringing to the table. Like, if you're doing business and you're exchanging value for value, which is what you do in business, it's what you do if you are working in advertising or sponsorships, who you vote for should not matter. Now, obviously, all of this got Dana riled up, and on the spot, while he was doing this podcast, he decided that he was going to throw out all of the Pelotons that they had at the UFC headquarters, and he followed through with this. Here's an article from right after. Dana White removes all Pelotons from UFC headquarters after they dissed Theo Von over political interview. He said, we're getting rid of Pelotons. Pelotons are out of the gym. My guys are going to take the Pelotons out of the gym today. We are getting rid of them. We are going to go throw them in the effing garbage today. I mean, hey, if you want to hurt a company for infringing upon your beliefs, you got to hit them where it hurts. And UFC is incredibly popular. This is probably hitting them where it hurts. And of course, since this is now blowing up this week, people reached out to Peloton for comment, and surprisingly, they actually responded pretty quickly. And a spokesperson disputed the claim that it requested Vaughn to remove episodes and told Fox News Digital. I don't think it is a surprise to anybody watching this channel that brands...
Fucking pussy liberals.
that the company pulled its advertising due to the comedian's content going against the company's brand safety guidelines. Like, it's exactly what we heard from Harry's when they pulled out of Daily Wire. brands and values misalignment. It's all just corporate marketing speak trying to skirt around the problem. Anyway, moving on, according to the spokesperson, Peloton's brand safety guidelines prohibit the company from advertising in proximity to drug and alcohol use, vulgar language, inappropriate things. That's very professional, Peloton. Crude humor, sexual themes, political issues, and racial issues. Like, guys, there are so many holes in this excuse for pulling the sponsorship out of Theo Von's podcast. Like, first of all, you know what you're getting into when you sponsor a comedian's podcast, especially a comedian like Theo Von.
Hold on. We gotta start over, David.
For example, with my sponsors, they know that I'm going to make these funny jokes when I transition, like when I make jokes I'm not pull any stunts like Peloton, because they knew what they were getting into when they sponsored me. And secondly, upon further research and very quick and easy research, aka a Google search, it seems that Peloton actually doesn't care about being in proximity to political or racial issues, which is the reason they claim to have pulled the sponsorship out of his podcast. And the hypocrisy here is just insane, because they have gone out of their way to support causes and issues like BLM, and not just, a little bit of support and posting Black Square when it was popular in 2020. No, they have pages and pages on their website dedicated to support.
Why the
BLM
fuck are you emoting, you fucking
and not
bitch?
just that, they have a racial justice.
Look like that.
Talking about some goo goo god, baby. Nigga, what is that nigga doing?
Fucking bullshit.
We appreciate it, Big Daddy. Oh, y'all niggas gang. Oh, yo, my nigga right there, bro. He about to fucking smash both of y'all. He about to beat both the back end. Fucking Missy Elliott and fucking Whoopi Goldberg in the back, bro.
Hold on, sir. Can I explain something, please?
Yo, I got this delicious ass steak. Y'all niggas want a bite, bro? From Applebee's.
Okay, but can I explain something to you first,
Go
right?
ahead, Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay, that's uncalled for. But anyway, I'm from the UK. She's from Texas.
Shut your bitch ass up. You from the United States with your little ratchet ass. Nigga, you got them dreads in your head. You ain't from... Who the fuck is you talking about, Franklin? The fuck, nigga, with your big ass chin? Nigga, I'll beat your fucking ass, nigga. The fuck, nigga? Niggas lock in this bitch, cuz on crib, nigga. I don't need to know the truth.
What you need to do, pick your lazy ass up, go to the store and get hot Cheetos. And buy like 6 of these and just drink the fuck out of it.
Otro día mi vieja me cagó a peo porque dice que el baño está...
A little bill. He's a little Hercules. Show me my... Coming here to work is my 40th birthday gift to myself. So.
Those having fun, fuck it, let him do what he wants.
Coming here to work. Hey, old school. Do you have diabetes?
Nice to meet you, sir. What's your name, sir?
This fund, literally. Last year, we unequivocally stated that Black Lives Matter and committed ourselves to fighting for racial justice and equality. We announced the Peloton Pledge, our 4-year, $100 million investment in both the fight against racial injustice and inequity and the promotion of health and well-being for all. And I emphasize $100 million because that is not just some small fund. It's not like they had their employees all make a $25 donation to the BLM headquarters. $100 million.
$100 billion.
And yet they say that they do not want to be in proximity to racial and political issues. Bullshit. Now, in addition to BLM, they are always at the front of the line, unveiling pride collections and hosting LGBTQ advocacy events. And in 2023, whether you like it or not, those are all political issues. And even Peloton acknowledges that. So no, it's not about your brand safety and not wanting to be in proximity to racial issues and political issues. It's you not wanting to be around certain political issues and political ideologies. And if they had just said, we don't agree with you, Vaughn, RFK Jr. or any of the political guests that he's had on recently, we want to be a beacon of radical leftism, we don't want to align with this, I maybe would have respected them a little more because they were being honest. And it is their company. Like, they are allowed to do with their company what they want to do. They are allowed to support the values that they want to support, but they lied. And then they tried to cover it up and play both sides, say, no, it wasn't about political reasons, it was about something totally different. We don't want to be around inappropriate things. Like, that is the complete opposite of standing up for your values. That's just you being soft and trying to avoid criticism from both sides. And I just could not be happier that the story finally saw the light of day, because later in the podcast, Theo says that this happened, a while ago. So he's been sitting on this information while Peloton was able to intimidate him and completely get away with it. But now, thanks to Dana White's outrage and the fact that this went viral and UFC threw away all of their Pelotons, the entire world knows about it. And now we can let audiences decide whether they want to continue supporting a brand like Peloton. Know that the company pulled its advertising due to the comedian's content going against the company's brand safety. Shy away from working.
Is we have Robert? Yeah.
I love it. It's my heart, it's my soul.
Actually, a giant flesh creature. This is really weird if this is your first time hearing any of it, but mind you, the first time I talked about it, it took 3 hours, so I'm doing my best. The island of Alcatraz is a giant creature that kills and replicates any biological matter it comes across. At the end of the video, we see that Alcatraz has made it to the mainland, and by the year 2020, the Alcatraz zone has infected everything to West Texas. Now, in the first video, I didn't really emphasize how big of a deal this was, mostly because I really didn't understand the gravity of what was being implied. But it turns out that this Alcatraz zone is a giant flesh conglomerate that, as Alex said in one of his interviews, looks like the Thing from the movie The Thing, the giant amalgamation of human and animal body parts. And yeah, that's just what all the land looks like from California to Texas. So, not good. Now, national monuments aren't the only thing changed in United States history within the monument mythos. Some things changed, such as the presidency. Because in 1968, we see that James Dean is elected president instead of the historical counterpart of Richard Nixon. I'll have a lot to say about James Dean in a little bit, but this establishes our 2 main timelines. There is one world known as the Deanverse, which is the universe we follow throughout the story, and there's another world known as the Nixonverse. The Nixonverse being more similar or perhaps even the same as our world, given that events within this Deanverse share similarities to ours, but with major differences, like President Dean being elected. There's other reasons that I consider the Nixonverse to be our universe, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But that's not to say that the Nixonverse we see later in the Monument Mythos is our universe. I mean, by drastic measures. But I'll talk about why all that is when we get to it. Just understand for now that there's 2 timelines. One can be imagined as ours, and the other is the one that these events are taking place in. It's also worth mentioning that at this time, many people believe James Dean to be the devil. We see that in 2003, a being known as the Angel steals Air Force One and visits various monuments. We'll later find out that it's the Angel who is graffitiing monuments such as Rushmore mentioned earlier. After that, we're told that people are restrained within the Lincoln Memorial statue, and a government agent named Leonard Moreland tells us that this position is known as a Lincoln Looker and is decided by the United States President. This position was kept in secret for years until accounts such as that of Howard Melrose broke the story open. After this, we're told that within the DC monument grows one of these special trees. The same thing that was seen growing out of the president's heads at Mount Rushmore. And that during and after its construction, people were fed to this special tree. Now, we don't know what that means yet, but we will soon. In the modern age, 20 missing people, known as the Washington absentees, went missing at the DC monument. We're shown a diagram that tells us people are taken into the monument, elevated into the air, where music causes them to fall asleep, where they fall down to the earth, and whatever the process is, takes place. We see more graffiti from the Air Force One Angel before it seems the DC monument bends over on itself and a large explosion takes place. This causes the 19 Washington absentees to be spit out. We'll learn more about the 20th Washington absentee later. A news source known as the New Delaware Journal tells us that George Washington was found alive, frozen within the ice of the Delaware River. It's funny because in my original video, I made a lot of jokes about how this doesn't mean anything, and it's just kind of a side gag that Washington's still alive. I will be proven wrong about that in just a minute. One of our first big story beats come with the story of the Rockefeller tree tragedy. In 1934, John D. Rockefeller, who in our universe was the oil tycoon, but in the Dean-verse was the President of the United States. So, this former President Rockefeller searches for a Christmas tree to be placed in the Rockefeller Plaza. And of course, he ignores all signs of danger and decides to pick a special tree. Now, special trees have come up a few times by now. Effectively, they are a kind of cosmic power that will make more sense as we talk about the different dimensions and monsters within the mythos itself. But all you need to know for now is that these special trees are a very important item in the cosmic balance of the universe and should not be messed with. So, Rockefeller messes with it and eventually uses explosives and grave diggers to dig the tree out over the course of 3 years. In 1934, he places the tree in the Rockefeller Plaza, and a young girl named Virginia Arnoldson goes with her friends to put an ornament on top of the tree. This causes the tree to bend over and create a burst of energy, much like we saw at the DC monument. Virginia goes to a field of special trees in a location known as Wonderland. Wonderland will come up again shortly, but for now, when she comes out of Wonderland, everything is a little bit different. Her friends and family have changed, and it seems like she is now in the incorrect universe. Closer to the modern age, we see that a girl named Lauren Arnoldson is on a vacation to the Grand Canyon with her brother and father. We'll later see that her brother goes by the moniker of Dr. Disturbing on the internet, and her father is named Nathaniel Arnoldson. By connections that still aren't entirely known, this family is related to Virginia Arnoldson, the young girl who experienced the Rockefeller tragedy at the plaza and teleported to Wonderland in 1934. In Lauren's video, we see these giant floating creatures known as canyon crowns. Lauren remarks that the giant floating crown she sees is probably her Aunt Maya. Maya had been missing for some time, and Nathaniel had brought his kids out to the Grand Canyon in order to find her. I'm sure this seems all over the place, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, but I'm just laying out the pieces for now. We're then shown the story of Thomas Crawford, the artist who created the Statue of Freedom, a real statue that sits over the Capitol Dome to this day. However, in this account, which is shared between Thomas and his daughter Nina, we're shown that Thomas became obsessed with the statue, eventually cutting off pieces of himself and inserting them inside of the statue itself. Nina, Thomas's daughter, begins to miss her father and feels his energy connected to the Freedom statue. So the little girl hides inside of the box that is shipping freedom to the United States. But after the statue breaks out and takes the young girl with her, it seems from the police report that Nina was also murdered and pieces of her shoved inside and on the outside of the freedom statue itself. Effectively, both the creator of the statue and his daughter were murdered by this sculpture, and as we'll later see, their souls still exist within the freedom statue. In the modern age, a group known as the ADA, or the Anti-Dean Association. This is a group who despise President Dean and oppose all modern government action, or at least all that we've been shown throughout the story. In the midst of a protest, the ADA tried to destroy the Freedom Statue and knock it off of the Capitol Dome. This causes Freedom to shoot to life and slaughter dozens of people at the Capitol riot, and simultaneously creating one of the most terrifying images of the entire story, because a giant 20-foot woman chasing you down with a sword, not fun. And that's the end of Season 1. Season 1 mostly just placed these pieces of the world out on the table with not a lot of cooperation between them. But Season 2 starts to tie the strings together. At the beginning of Season 2, a company known as Maze makes massive leaps in technology, creating at-home computers as early as 1960. That is, until it seems use of modern digital technology causes these massive creatures to begin attacking the United States. As you can imagine, all digital technology is then ordered to be destroyed or turned in. These attacks that occur on companies like Maze, particularly around 1980, seem to come after something known as Project Horned Serpent in 1972, when the government begins to try to destroy true forces of mass destruction, or in other words, things like special trees. And shortly after that, in combination with humanity's use of technology, these massive behemoths begin to attack the United States. Now you might be wondering, are these giant things that shoot up out of the ground and destroy entire cities related at all to things like the Liberty Lurker? And the answer is yes, and I'll explain why in a minute. We then see a video from Maya Arnoldson. If you'll remember, Maya is the sister of Nathaniel Arnoldson, the man who took his 2 kids to the Grand Canyon. We see that Maya was breaking into Maze facilities. We see graffiti from the Air Force One Angel that says all the monuments are connected. Something that didn't mean a lot then, but certainly does now. As she explores the underground caverns of the Maze facility, energy and electricity begin to shoot from the walls. Maya warns this that sites like these have not been fed in some time. Now we start to see some connections. We know that there was some kind of giant creature underneath the Statue of Liberty that was being fed a steady supply of people. And now, when Maya goes to visit the underground caverns of a Maze facility, lightning shoots out from the walls as she says they haven't been fed. After this are news reports of a ship stuck within the Suez Canal. Just as in real life, this ship is known as the Ever Given, but unlike in real life, there's a giant crab monster underneath it that whenever the governments try to move the ship using a nuke for some reason, the crab stands up and just walks the ship into the desert. Eventually, the ship crashes into a building, and a bunch of people show up to steal stuff from the wreckage of the ship itself, but then this giant panic starts, and a bunch of people die. This leads survivors of the event to create a religion known as the Church of the Ever Given. And Howard Melrose, the same person who wrote the story about the Lincoln Looker, reports on the event and says that it was disgusting and appeared that everyone became one, referring to the giant flesh mass of death that they made. We're then given another look back at the presidency of James Dean, this time a tragedy that took place shortly after he took office. When sirens around the United States were hijacked and caused several people to die and others to experience permanent hearing loss. The ADA are accused of this terrorist attack, and the members of the ADA are taken to national monuments for, quote, rehabilitation. Of course, as we know, these giant monsters that need fed lie within these monuments, so it seems that Dean was using this moment to feed these creatures. Families of those who were taken to monuments say that they come back an entirely new and better person. This is in reference to the fact that after being fed or given to these special trees, people swap over into another reality, with their other iteration of them changing places, similar to what happened to Virginia at the Rockefeller Plaza. Also, the majority of the United States needs hearing implants after this event, and the Dean presidency effectively cures deafness, supposedly. After this, we're shown a video of the Starry Sphinx. This video tells us that the Sphinx is a creature from that travels to the planet Mars, and that underneath the pyramids of Giza are these massive towers that each contain special trees. We're told that ancient warriors would be given a concoction of drugs and hew at the special trees all day and night to prevent them from growing any further. We see these bright lights appear on the ground that create a giant lightning strike. In future videos, we're told that this lightning strike creates a material known as Giza glass. Giza glass is a special material that when it's made into weaponry such as blades, has a supernatural property. This property is not cut in the way they instead, that piece of their body simply takes up another place in reality. For example, if someone was to take a Giza glass sword and cut off your hand, you would still be able to control and feel your hand, it just would no longer be attached to your arm. That's because Giza glass doesn't separate matter from matter like metal does. Instead, it separates one place in reality from another. This was discovered when the original finder of Giza glass, a man named Petrie, fell and cut his head off on a piece of Giza glass. But of course, due to the glass's property, his head was still alive. This has been described by Alex as making pieces of your body wireless. So in other words, that piece of your body still works, it's just no longer in the same geometric position. Now, when someone's head is cut off by Giza glass, that creates complications. Because, the cosmic forces of the universe don't like a head that controls the body, or a body that controls the head, or whichever way you want to look at it. So the head begins to discolor and swell to gigantic proportions, and effectively act as its own force separate from the body. In other words, getting your head cut off by Giza glass allows your head to cheat physics, and it can grow to whatever size or float in whatever direction you choose. Eventually, several blades are fashioned out of Giza glass and given to statues that are alive, which I'll get to eventually. And these living statues that are wielding these Giza glass blades are placed within the Grand Canyon in order to protect government secrets. Now, for one, this is all hidden from public knowledge, but two, probably starts to put some pieces together. Why in Lauren Arnoldson's Grand Canyon trip do you see a giant floating thing moving through the Grand Canyon? Because within the Grand Canyon, these living statues with the Giza glass swords are placed, and whenever they cut off someone's head, their head becomes a, essentially, giant floating airship. It also makes sense as to why, after the Freedom statue was shot down in the 88 riot and, slaughtered everyone on the ground by decapitating them with swords, the statue was then moved to the Grand Canyon. Howard Melrose, the reporter mentioned a couple times at this point, leaked government files detailing the victims of this Giza Guardian program, with one of the victims of the Guardian program being Maya Arnoldson, the aunt of Lauren Arnoldson. We're then told at some point Nathaniel Arnoldson is killed. And from the video that Lauren takes, it seems that he was also killed by a Giza Guardian, and his head, now a king and crown, has followed her back home. We then jump back to the 1940s, where we read another writing from this universe's President Rockefeller. Rockefeller reveals that back before World War I, he sold canyon crowns to Germany. If you'll recall, these crowns have the ability to float through space on their own volition. So, Germany begins to use them as a sort of fuel for airships. Eventually, when the World War begins, Germany uses these airships on Allied forces. This information is kept secret from the general public, but weapons are developed by the government to destroy these German airships. This weapon used to destroy the airships is a sort of death ray that uses a special lens that is secret to us, at least for now. When this death ray is deployed, it works in destroying the airships. However, the energy let out by the death ray destroys the 17 men who were on the ground operating it. However, because we're dealing with weird cosmic energy and multidimensional travel, of course, these 17 men just don't die. Instead, their body parts are atomized and fused together into one hyper-reality creature. This creature, which is now 17 people operating as one, travels back to the United States and kills former President Rockefeller as they blame him for their creation. It does this by melting the door off of Rockefeller's bunker and effectively vaporizing him. In the final bit of information that I covered in the previous video, we are given the conclusion to Virginia Arnoldson's story. If you'll remember, that is the young girl who switched realities at the original Rockefeller Tree tragedy. Virginia elaborates on her time in Wonderland and says that while in her original accounting she implied that her time in Wonderland was a few brief moments, here she tells us that it felt more like years and years. This field of trees was very loud, with people teleporting from one location to the other and these blinding flashes of light. She was a young girl, afraid and alone, before a man named Everett approached her and said that he would take care of her. Virginia notes that whenever she looks up or down, it seems as if the trees extend continuously in both directions, implying that the plane of reality she is on now is practically infinite, with one universe and its counterpart constantly reflected one over the other. Eventually, after years of torment, Virginia is placed back into reality. However, as mentioned in her original account, everything seemed different, and it seemed that now she was in the wrong universe. Determined to get back to the universe she was born in, Virginia seeks out guidance. She's called back to the Rockefeller Plaza, where a giant woman who appears to be a living tree tells her that she must come back in several years, and that when she does come back, she must exchange a life for her own. During this time of waiting, Virginia falls in love with Leonard Moreland, the government agent who gives an account on both the Starry Sphinx and the Lincoln Looker. The two fall in love, and Virginia becomes pregnant with their child, who she decides to name Everett. After her time of waiting is up, Virginia travels to the D.C. Monument, and once she's there, she undergoes the protocol that we saw all the way back in our original description of how the D.C. Monument is fed. However, after what seems like hundreds of years, Virginia comes out of this comatose state on the ground, only to realize that she's no longer pregnant. It seems that somewhere in her transition through Wonderland and back to this universe, the life of her unborn child was given.
Oh my god, I can't fucking do anything.
Brokenhearted, Virginia and the other Washington absentees are eventually released in the 2003 incident that we saw in the original DC Monument video. Virginia remarks that she's sorry to everyone who she hurt, and we're shown a painting that Virginia made of all of her friends who were subjected to this harsh reality when they went to the Rockefeller Plaza in 1934. And after being shown this cheery image, we're given the message that the 20th Washington absentee is believed to be her unborn son, Everett. And that is as far as I got in my original video. Now, I'm sure a lot of that seemed confusing, and you probably have a lot of questions, and I assure you that at least one or two of them might be answered. So now that we've covered all the old material, let's get into the new stuff. Beginning with the first episode of Season 2 that I have yet to cover, Air Force One Angel. Air Force One Angel of the original Air Force One hijack back at the beginning of Season 1. If you'll remember, some kind of creature took over Air Force One and drove it from monument to monument, repeating various warnings. We see a made simulation of the plane strike, meaning that eventually the government shot Air Force One down. After this, we see a map of the United States that shows it has been divided into 3 different zones. These zones are the Alcatraz Zone, the Rushmore Zone, and the Washington Zone. And also, while I'm here, I want to give a huge thank you to Matthew Schroeder. You can find him on Twitter at Jobless Matthew, because Matthew has been a longtime member of the Monument Mythos community and was a part of the Discord server back when Alex did his Q&As. So Matthew transcribed a lot of Alex's answers and passed those on to me, which I greatly appreciate. I mention that now because a lot of the clarification as to what these events mean came from Alex's answers to those Q&As. Among them were his clarifications about these 3 zones. As we discussed earlier, the Alcatraz Zone is effectively a giant field of rotten flesh, whereas the Rushmore Zone and the Washington Zone are nearly entirely overrun with special trees. This makes sense because over a lot of the previous videos we've seen, they began to pop up more and more, almost as if they're beginning to. Well, in the Rushmore Zone, they seem to be more spread. The population is more sparse out there. In the Washington Zone, they're much more clustered. And again, these things will randomly light off with electricity and teleport you out of existence. So the country's not doing great. The capital of each of these zones, Alcatraz, Rushmore, and Washington, D.C., have been renamed to their original Native American titles. The map is then labeled Extribus Unum, which means out of 3, 1. This is a play on the American motto of E pluribus unum, which means out of many one, and symbolizes States is made up of these 3 zones. We're then shown a video of what appears to be a giant egg floating in space as we get a message from the ADA. The message says, Al Gore's America is a shell for the true ruler beneath our feet. It is time for the underground god to leave. He does not belong here. But the world egg cannot hatch without force. We must fracture the zones ourselves. We must split the earth open. Once it leaves, there will be peace and a state for each and every person. No more zones, for the cracks will be the true borders. 1,000 states of America are 1,000 states of peace. We are no longer the Anti-Device Association. We are the advocates for the division of America. How will we divide the land? With our fallen angel, of course. Who would have thought that he would...
Yo!
We found him before anyone else. Burnt and broken from the blast. He will be a walking atom bomb. He will evict the horned serpent the same way he evicted the traitor, President Rockefeller, from reality. We're then shown the ADA's new logo of a serpent wrapped around an egg. So there's a lot to break down with this. The first thing that we see is
I got platinum. That's the best I've ever fucking done.
Given that this is 2003, the same time as the DC Monument disaster, rather than George W. Bush being president, it is now Al Gore. However, that is the least of our worries because the